If you want to grow bigger, healthier cannabis plants without making it grow more complicated, you are going to love this because today I'm going to show you 3 beneficial soil microbes that do a ton of the heavy lifting for your plants underground. But before we do, this video is brought to you by Real Growers Recharge. If you want massive roots, if you want monster harvests, you got to check out Real Growers Recharge. It's built for cannabis. It's proven by pros. You want bigger yields, better flavor, stronger plants? Check it out. Just going over to realgrowers.com, use Scotty420 coupon code, get you 20% off your first order. And come on, now let's talk about some microbes.
Okay, so Real Growers Recharge filled with soil microbes. Let's talk about some of our favorite ones and why they do such a good job at boosting your yields, flavor, potency.
Yeah, man, I get excited when I learn this stuff or when I explain and talk about this. It is absolutely amazing. I see you and I were talking about aliens before, right? And how cool it is to, hear stories about that. Dude, it's right. When you go into a microscope and go into the roots and see what's going on there, they might as well be aliens, man. So it's very interesting, man.
There's a bunch of little life forms in your soil doing all kinds of work.
Let's start with mycorrhizae, right? Myco means fungus, rhizae means root. It's like this fungus root, okay? And it forms a relationship. Cannabis, different species of mycorrhizae form relationships with different plants. So you'll see from a tree to shining tree where they talk about those filaments going and making a forest. That's beautiful stuff for pine trees that doesn't apply to cannabis. They're very strain specific as far as the mycorrhizae is, and cannabis likes one type of mycorrhizae. It used to be called Glomus intraradices. Now it is called Rhizophagus irregularis, okay? And you can snicker or whatever, but rhizo is root, and a phage is something like that infects something. Like a bacteriophage is a virus that infects a bacteria. So this rhizophage is a fungus that infects the root. And I say infect meaning it really does give it a positive benefit, but it gets into that root. So that's what mycorrhizae does.
Endo, ecto, I've heard the 2 different types. This is an endo. It gets inside of the root.
Yeah, and you'll see VAM, vesicular arbuscular mycorrhizae. It sounds fancy, but an arbor, it's like a tree. The mycorrhizae will go in and it will grow like a tree with a bunch of branches inside the roots. This expands all those branches. All that is nutrient exchange site right there. So now all of a sudden, and by the way, and then out of that tree grows a tail, grows a bunch of tails. Those are called hyphae. They're like the hairs. They're microscopic, but those things go a lot further than root hairs. They can go millimeters out, a couple millimeters out, so they can grab nutrient and water that's not available to the regular plant roots. And then they've got this whole cavern inside where they can make more exchanges. They've got a whole, it's almost like a port that they have. Instead of a dock, they have a port. So it just expands the nutrient holding capacity of the soil, the water holding capacity of the plant rather, and it just makes a much stronger plant. Yeah, and a really cool thing about mycorrhizae is they call them exudates, and it exudes. It takes something from the plant, takes those sugars from the plant, it exudes them out of their pores, I guess, or whatever, and then the bacteria on the other side of the transaction, on the soil side of the transaction, are like, hey, I want some of that, and there's an exchange that goes on. So it facilitates this nutrient exchange, and you end up getting more surface area for roots to absorb nutrients, and then it's a symbiotic with the bacteria that allow those nutrients to be uptaken really easy. So it's pretty amazing stuff. Mycorrhizae is cool.
And mycorrhizae is one that I hear people talk about a lot.
Sure.
But the next 2 I don't hear very much about, but you're saying they're still pretty beneficial.
Huge, man. Trichoderma, by the way, so we talk about mycorrhizae putting those little trees, those arbuscles inside the roots and a little root hair outside. The trichoderma actually colonizes the rest of that, or the outside of the root. So you got the mycorrhizae working on the inside of the root, and then that trichoderma is pretty aggressive fungus that grows on the outside. It's beneficial to the plant, but its biggest benefit is it fights off pathogens. It's taken all the room there. So when some kind of pathogen comes in and wants to start a root rot colony, Man, there's no room. Sorry, man. This aggressive this aggressive trichoderma is already here. And so again, it is getting exudates, it is getting sugars from the plant that it can't make because it's stuck underground. So it wants to provide nutrient. It wants to keep the plant healthy so that sugar factory doesn't shut down. It's pretty cool stuff.
And you said it's aggressive. Isn't this also something that helps break down some of those complicated nutrients?
Yes, this breaks down pretty much anything. It's very aggressive decomposer. And what's going on? A lot of times we talk about microbes absorbing something and it being absorbed, it being inside a microbe. When the microbe dies, this trichoderma is able to break it down and it takes these nutrients and now makes them plant available again.
So this is also especially important if you're growing organic and you got those big nutrient compounds. This trichoderma goes in and helps break it down, make it faster for the plant to absorb.
All these are absolutely essential if you are growing organically, because organics think of like an apple with a bunch of fiber and then there's a little bit of nutrition in there. There's a little bit of sugars in there. It's the same thing with an organic molecule. You're mining the little bit of nutrition that's in there and you're leaving all that fiber or whatever you want to call it, soil building, humus or fiber, whatever you want to call it, you're leaving that. So in organics, that's what you're doing. In synthetics, you're kind of doing the opposite. We're coating our roots with that trichoderma, with the bacillus, with the mycorrhizae, or we're coating that rhizosphere, I should say, and it's buffering the amount of nutrient that can go in. So these salt-based nutrients are immediately plant available. So it is actually coating the roots, the rhizosphere, I guess, both the soil side and the root side, and is acting as a buffer. It's going to make transactions. That's why it's a lot harder to burn your plants when you're using soil microbes.
Okay, so they kind of play a beneficial role whether you're growing organic or synthetic.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big myth that we got to bust here. Because they're absolutely essential in organic growing, people think that that's the only place where you need them, because in synthetic growing, the nutrients are plant available. They say, oh, you don't need microbes, or microbes are no good in synthetic nutrients. That couldn't be further from the truth. As a matter of fact, when they do experiments, the microbes grow more with the right amount of synthetic nutrients because they've got all the food they need. So microbes definitely work with synthetic nutrients. They just do different things. As opposed to being a nutrient solubilizer with organics, they're more of a nutrient buffer and protector to keep it from getting overfed with synthetics.
Okay, and you mentioned another one. We went over mycorrhizae, we went over trichoderma. You mentioned something called bacillus.
Yeah.
What does that do?
Bacillus are like the most active. Those are the ones that I think about all the time. We just talked about trichoderma and mycorrhizae. Talk about the rhizosphere is where the soil meets the root, right? It's that little tiny bit of a space where the soil meets the root. That's where that water and those nutrient transactions are happening. So we've got the trichoderma and the mycorrhizae on the root side, right? They're colonizing the root. On the soil side, it's loaded with these bacteria, these bacillus bacteria, and these are nutrient solubilizers. They can touch a piece of just a nutrient, a little particle of nutrient. They can absorb it. They can wrap around it and absorb it. And then they can control the pH. They can change things. They can chelate it. Their job is to take that nutrient and bring it to the plant and exchange it for those sugars from the roots so it can still live. So it's making this transaction, and the bacteria they're super populated. They're super aggressive, and they're just the nutrient facilitators. They're the ones making the transactions. Yeah, the coolest thing, or one of the coolest things about bacillus is that salt-based nutrient, that plant-available nutrient. It's just some tiny form, it's just some tiny particle, very easy to wash away. There's nothing really holding a salt into the soil. So when it wraps up in this bacteria, that bacteria, they're sticky. I think about the bacteria before you brush your teeth in the morning. It's bacteria sticking to your teeth, So those bacteria are holding that nutrient particle. It's usually inside, it's absorbed in that nutrient particle, and then it is able to keep it. Now you've got it's inside an organic wrapper that's stuck to a soil particle. You don't just wash away so easy. So that's why you don't leach. You can't just leach out the nutrients in organic or super soil. They're there.
Okay, so growing organically, the bacillus helps break those nutrients down and get them to the plant.
Sure.
Growing synthetically, it helps hold them there so they don't just get flushed out.
I feel like I did a good job of explaining. Yeah.
Okay.
And they also, by the way, they make all sorts of enzymes, and they're responsible for, or when a plant root touches those the bacillus, it has enzymes that want it to branch out, and it makes a bunch of those branch roots that we talked about, more nutrient absorption points. And what's really cool about these, man, as the root grows, it really just grows from the tip is really like the new growth tip is really where most of everything is absorbed by. So if you have a healthy microbial population in your rhizosphere, right as those roots are expanding, that mycorrhizae is growing, that the bacillus are facilitating the transactions. It is happening right there, and it makes a huge difference if you have that.
And you mentioned the root tip,
Yeah.
getting that mycorrhizae on there early. Does that make a difference?
Yeah, well, the mycorrhizae and the trichoderma both colonize the root. Mycorrhizae, we talked about just the root tip extending. If you get mycorrhizae on there early, like when the seed pops or when the clone pops and just gets its first couple of roots, as those tips are extending, the mycorrhizae is already in there. Remember those trees, those arbustles are already in there. So as they're expanding out, it's just expanding with the mycorrhizae already in there. So getting them going early is big. And then the trichoderma usually takes a little bit more time to colonize. So if you get I soak my cubes in recharge. As soon as I put them in the solo cups, I make sure they get recharged. And the idea is I'm facilitating a strong mycorrhizae inoculation first. And so as that root's expanding, all I need to do is make sure the mycorrhizae in the tip is still alive and expanding. And then the rest of the root gets covered in trichoderma. I got all that protection there. It's a great 1-2 punch.
Well, I've seen when you're popping seeds, even when you're soaking the seed in paper
Yep.
towel, you soak it in recharged
As
water.
soon as that taproot comes out, if I get the mycorrhizae to invaginate that root, I can't help it. These are scientific terms, all right? It gets in between, it goes in between those root cells, and it just inserts itself, and then it grows a little tree in there. It's pretty amazing, and that's how it gets its nutrients. So, yeah, that happens at the tip, though. So by keeping just a healthy microbial population, keeping that or getting that mycorrhizae to live right from the start, now all it's got to do is expand as those root tips grow.
So invagination and just the tip are the main key takeaways of today's episode.
And I mean, if you start learning about this stuff, it all makes sense. It does. Hey, but those are just 3 of my favorite soil microbes. Yes, that's right. I have more. But come on, what about you? Are you using microbes in your grow? Do you see a huge benefit? Let me know in the comments. And come on, if you like this video, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, share this one with another grower you know, and check out the other couple videos YouTube's recommending. We think you will dig them.